Meet living legend Eugene Gray, world-renowned guitarist, vocalist, music instructor, philanthropist, and founder and executive director of Roots of Music.
Music is God's magic. It's vibration in its purest sense. We're dealing with tones that do not discriminate. And for me, the purpose of music is to wash your soul just like soap washes your body.
Eugene Gray, a son of the Jamaican soul, tells his own story in his own words.
Early Eugene Gray. I was born in Green Island, in Hanover. And my dad, with his job then, was transferred to Eastern Hanover. So by the time I was 2 or 3, we went to Ramble in Eastern Hanover. From Ramble to Dias. So I came to Dias about 1955. I was basically a 4-year-old child. And we stayed in Dias for quite a while. That's where I did elementary school, high school, went to Russie's and all that stuff. It is in Russie's that the music thing started. Now, it was a little bit disappointing for my dad because even as a baby, I used to say, boy, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a doctor, that. So they're looking forward to having this physician in the family. Only to go to Russie's and discover music. And the doctor thing went right through the window. So anyhow, while in Dias, at 9 years old, I was in elementary school. I used to attend Cocoon Elementary School. Mr. John Kerr was the principal then. Very good man. And I taught myself to play the harmonica while I was in Cocoon. And the harmonica thing was a joke. My dad owned the harmonica, I didn't. And while he's at work, he worked for parish council. He's gone to the office. Idle, curious boy. I pick up this harmonica, trying to play the songs that I hear on the radio because I love the music I hear on the radio. And I could not make sense out of what the harmonica is saying, is playing back for me. So I got angry and I threw the thing to the ground. That's me and my impatience. That's how I was then. And the top fell off and all that. I said, wow, I realized what I did. When my dad come in, he was going to kick my butt. So I put the harmonica back as well as I could on the bureau. And when he came, you put something someplace, when it's moved. My dad's a big man, he knows. He said, Eugene, come here, I know you. What happened? And, I'm there, of course, playing the timid. And he said, look here, don't touch this thing and you didn't ask. Don't touch my harmonica. So, that's fine. Next day he left. My impatience. I touched the harmonica again. And I did the same foolishness because everything that bothers me, I throw it on. I don't want to deal with it anymore. Broke 3 or 6 of the keys. Wow. This time now, I'm going to get a little butt warming because I disobeyed the rule twice and furthermore damaged my dad's stuff. So anyhow, he got so angry. He said, look here, I can't play this thing anymore. Take it. I learned to play it with the 6 keys missing because I figured out by then how the tones go. That began to explain to me how the musical scale works. There was a system, so I figured it out. While in Cocoon. By the way, Cocoon is not the movie. Cocoon is a district near Blenheim. Blenheim is where Sir Alexander Bustamante came from. Cocoon, Dias, Kingsville, that area. So it's Cocoon school that I went to. And one of my great friends was a senior for me in Cocoon. Tony Ramsey was his name. They had piano in their homes and all that. So sometimes when I'm going to the store, I would pass by and hear him playing the piano. And I always wanted to hook up with him and play music together. So we do a little performance for the school one day, and I played the harmonic, he played the organ. The school had an organ. But then he graduated, went on to Russie's. I'm still at Cocoon. I caught up with him 2 years later. So while we're in Russies, I guess they were thinking of putting together a little school band. The name of the band eventually became the Serenaders. So it was Tony Ramsey, myself, Barry Dixon, we call him Barry Dixon, Charles Dixon. So Rusty's Serenaders coming into being. I started Rusty September 1963. There was also Jerry Lewis, member of the band. Am I leaving out anybody? Brian Atkinson. Brian Atkinson became a bass player with Studio One later. Eric Frater, we call him Rickabacker. That's where we started playing guitar in a band. Eric's father was the principal of the school, Mr. Eric Freitas, a senior. And we entered Pop and Mentor competition 1964, won first place. Wow. Me, with my little high top pants. Playing Motown up there, and it was nice, a wonderful experience though, to see the people in front of me and they're really enjoying what I'm doing. I said, wow, this thing has something, there's a fulfillment from it, just to see the people enjoy the music. And of course, being a child, 12, 13 years old, a child is always this special enigma, so I get all the praise and all that, which is fine.
Now, the next song I'm going to play for you now, it's the first song I ever wrote. I was 12 years old, and we won first place in Jamaican Pop and Mentor when I was 13 with this song. It's on harmonica. That's my first instrument. So, hey guys, it's a 1-6-4-5 in C. 1, 2.
That is what inspired me that I could do music, and I love music so much. I started to try to understand a lot more, and the music program we had in Russies is very average basic stuff. You go to the refectory and you sing some little songs with the music teacher that they brought in, a lady from Canada, Lena Hamilton, white Canadian. But we wanted to do more. I really wanted to really get serious training. So I started to speak to my father about that. So look here, I know I have to get the education thing done, but I would like for you to think of sending me to a place like England, because at the time England was more open to, to us in Jamaica than America was. Send me to England to study music formally, because I really, really want to be a musician. What also inspired me for music was the music I was hearing from the radio. My dad repaired radios as a hobby, and he was very good at it. We had all kind of radios in the house, packed up people's radios, Telefunken, Pi, Mollard, Grundig, you name it. And sometimes some of the radio have the bass. And when I hear that full sound coming from the radios, boy, the music hit me inside there. I discovered Fats Domino and, Bobby Blue Bland, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, all of these things. I said, wow, so much music. I don't know what the instruments look like, but I know what I'm hearing is magic, and they do something to my soul, and I can't stop dancing. I know the melodies of everything that I ever listened to. So I said, I really, really would like to learn to do that. And my dad said, well, focus on the education thing. Music can stay aside, because the life of a musician, as a child, I don't know. I don't understand. I just know the joy that I feel and this happiness, and look at people feel as happy as I am when I play for them. So that started it. Pop and Mentor competition. There are different categories. They have categories for bands. Our type of band were using electronic instruments by then. And you have different stages in the competition. The quarterfinals, like We Are From Lucy, The whole thing, the house band like Byron Lee or Carlos Malcolm would come, and they will back some of the singers. We as a band, we use their instruments and we perform there. If the judges rule in favor of us, we move on to the next level. So we will go to Montego Bay, perform at the Palladium Theatre against other bands now, so the competition is getting bigger. And if we are ruled favorably there by the judges, then we move on to the finals. So we made it through all the stages, and the finals were held at the National Stadium. Byron Lee was the host band then. And there I met other finalists, or quarterfinalists, or semi-finalists from different parts of the country, because this is a big finale. That's where I saw Count Ozzy with the Rasta guys for the first time, and a lot of people in that category. There was a band called the Manchonil Ska Band. I never forgot them. We were also competing against another band out, I think they were out of Trenchtown, named the Victors. They were probably Siaga's younger people. In the Victors, the gentleman who was playing bass, I later learned that he was Slim Smith, the famous singer. So we won over the Victors. And we won £100. Them days, a lot of money. We got a trophy. We also have to make certain appearances like the Denby show and all of that good stuff. With the £100, we went to Music Mart. This is just amazing. How far you could stretch £100 those days. We bought an organ, a little electronic organ. We bought a guitar amplifier, Vox. It's a British amp. 15 watts, can have 4 instruments in 15 watts, but it's all tube, so it's strong. We also bought a bass. We also bought a drum set, so we bought 4 instruments out of £100. Them days we were not really taking the money, and when the school band would perform for any school event or other events, we would bring the money back to the school. We were giving the money to the school to help to build a library. They were always talking about improving the school library, so we were doing that. So as long as the band lasted, all the money we made went to the school. It was after the band then I started playing for a salary per se, but that's where it started for me. And when my friends moved on, Tony Ramsey went to Jamaica School of Arts, so did Brian. Them guys moved on, they furthering in their education. I'm still going through the stages at Russie's. I decided that I think I'm kind of outgrowing the harmonica. That was my main instrument. I wanted to do more. I love the piano, never had one. Tony was gone, so I don't go to his house that much anymore. I don't have a drum set. There was a guy in school, Bernie Spence from Grange Hill, Westmoreland. Bernie inherited a trombone from some relative, but Bernie had no interest in music and he didn't want to play the trombone, so I borrowed it and he loaned it to me gladly. I taught myself the trombone. At that time I couldn't read the music for the trombone. I never even understood that trombone is a bass instrument. I have to read from a bass clef. Never know all of that. I was teaching myself basic reading using the harmonica and reading from the encyclopedias that we had or what the school had. No one to really teach me formally how these things really work, so I'm trying to figure out all of that. Nonetheless, I could play extremely well by ear, and I was a Dan Drummond freak. So anything Dan Drummond, I can pick up my trombone and play it because I listened to the record over and over, and I did that. I have now become a trombone player, and I was playing pretty well. Rusty's has a tradition of musicians, people who make a profession out of musicians. Before my generation of Rusty's students, there was a band in Rusty's, I think they call themselves the Saints, led by William Dixon, drummer, and Tony Hammond. Tony Hammond eventually had Tony Hammond and the Falcons out of Mandeville. By the time I joined up with Tony, his band's name was changed to Tony Hammond and the Sultans. These are famous people, and they thought I could play well. So even though I'm a child, there are certain environments, certain establishments I'm not allowed. I shouldn't be there. But because I could play well, and as I say, a kid is an enigma, so they have me playing, and I created quite a reputation. Willie's band, Willie would take me to Montego Bay to play in the nightclubs. That's how I got exposed to the nightclubs in Montego Bay, nightclubs, the hotels, and all that. And in Savlamar in Westmoreland, there was another gentleman, there's a Chinese gentleman, Clive Williams, who owned a business in what they call Ricketts River, haberdashery business, but he was also a musician. He would come and ask my mom if I could play in his band, because I was a child. I was like going on 13, 14. And he promised that he would pay me, and he did. He treated me very, very well. It was really honorable working for Clive. I played in Willie Dixon's band. I would go to Club 35, which eventually became the Banana Boat Club on Union Street. And I was playing as a child there. Sometimes I would fill in on drums for Willie. Or sometimes Willie has a problem with one arm, and if he's incapacitated, I'd play the drum for the floor show too. So I'm that type of a little, polyglot for music, and it created quite a reputation. Now, Bernie graduated and took his trombone. That's my story, man. It's funny. And I'm stuck without an instrument. I still have the harmonica, but I want to play something else. So I asked my dad to purchase a guitar for me, order one from England, because he buys clothes and a few stuff from England all the time. But he didn't want to do that because he's not encouraging me. I'm taking this music thing too serious for his taste. And he said, in them days you could get a guitar for £5. Right? But I said no. And there was no other instrument in my house. So I said, so I'm going to play some music. And I said, I'm going to make an instrument. Never built one before. But that's how determined I am. And this thing inside of me just, you see, as a professor later said to me, you did not choose music, music chose you. And that is what I'm going through, this thing. I have to express this thing that is inside of me. So I got a nice piece of cedar board, and I was 14 then. I have a friend named Tony Francis. Tony was my age, but Tony's father was a carpenter, and Tony had skills with tools already. So I asked Tony I said, look here, I have a concept. And I drew it on the piece of board and cut it in the shape for me. Before that happened, I borrowed a guitar from an old gentleman in the community, Mr. Charles. In his early years, Mr. Charles went to America as a farm worker, came back with a guitar. And that must have been a long time ago, because you're talking the 60s, and the guitar was so old that it was coming apart. It's a big acoustic guitar. And for it to be losing all that frame of it, it's old. So I started practicing on the guitar, and my luck, it began to come apart in my hands. I said, oh Jesus, I'm in problems now. How am I going to explain to Mr. Charles that his guitar is going? And I'm nervous that I'm going to tell my parents, and then I'm going to get hassle for it, because my dad don't want me to take music that serious. So I explained to Mr. Charles what's happening to the guitar. I said, don't worry about it, young boy, it's alright. It's kind of old anyway. Help yourself. I said, wow, the best news I could have heard. So while his guitar is coming apart, I decided I'm going to salvage it and see what I can use to put on my new guitar that I'm building. So I took off the tuning pegs first. I measured the fretboard, because you have to be precise with the fretboard. I realized that. And I drew my own fretboard on my piece of board after Tony cut it for me, and I began to sand it, put my markers, everything, connected my tuning pegs, No, I'm making an electric guitar, not an acoustic guitar, because there's no way I have the skill to bend wood. I don't know how they do that, so it has to be a solid body electric guitar. But my dad doing radio, I understood a little bit about the electronics of a guitar, how it works, how to create the pickups. I got me a nail. This is a 10-penny nail. I know if you shock it a certain way with a 9-volt battery or so, it become electromagnet. My dad always have coil wires, copper wires, because he rewind transformers and speakers and everything, and I understood how that worked. So I begin to wrap my nail, creating my first electromagnetic pickup. So one end to the, so you start here, and when you finish winding, that's the other end. I stole a couple of potentiometer, or we call the switch to turn it up, from my father's radio parts, and connected on this thing. Then the next joke is, I have no strings. It never stops. Nobody to buy strings, and there's no place in the country that you can find strings. I would have to get to Montego Bay, mainly Kingston, to find strings for a guitar. Next part of it, I have no amplifier. But I figured out a trick. In those days, in the back of most radios, good radio, there are two input areas for 1/8 jacks. I stole some 1/8 jacks from my dad, connected to the ends of the pickup, stick it in the radio, and I heard sound. So, wow. So when my dad's not home, I plug into the radio. But the strings eventually on that guitar were not real guitar strings, they were the same copper wires. Mm-hmm. But there was not enough for me to make 6 strings, only could make 4. So I began to teach myself bass, because I knew by then that a bass guitar is tuned from the last 4 strings of a guitar. So I tuned it. And I began to play through that. So I started playing bass and not guitar. By the time I was 15, now that started at 14, a year later I'm 15, playing in a little band in Grange Hill. Some of my high school friends and some other friends from Manning's High School put together this band named the Monarchs. And the Monarchs was really good. We were good for the time. We are about the same age, 14, 15, 16. And that's where I played bass until the Monarchs came apart. I'm just about getting ready to graduate. Russie's now 16, going on 17. And I said I want to play some music. So in 68, when I graduated, stayed home for a few months. One night I heard a car coming up the driveway. We lived in Salt Spring, Green Island. Person came inside and said good evening to my mom, and my grandfather was there. And said, I am Bradman Foot, the Foot brothers from Savamar, and we're putting together a band, and we've been trying to locate a young musician named Eugene Gray, and we heard that he's here. I said, wow, I want to find me in the bush in the night, because in places they don't have street light. My mom said, well, his dad would have to approve. So when my dad came, she told him and all that. My dad said, I want you to take this music thing serious. You are graduating Russies. You have your JSC, your GCs. There's a job for you waiting in my office or something else. But not music. I say yes sir, but in my heart is no sir, so I won't play music. Anyhow, my grandfather decided that he has to be in on the argument, and rightfully so. Bradman brought another gentleman the following meeting, because now I'm not allowed to play yet. They're trying to decide if I'm going to be able to do that. The gentleman who they brought was Mr. Owen Sinclair, Hurry. He was going to be the manager. Everybody know Hurry had some money, and it was secured. So my grandfather and my dad said, well, look here. I don't want my boy to become a slave doing so and so and so. He has a brain. He just graduated high school. He might have some talent. But how can you assure me that his life will be fine? Mr. Sinclair said, you don't have to worry about that. He's a high school grad. He has some brain. I'm opening a new store downtown near the Bata store in Great Georgia Street. He can get a position there as a manager or a co-manager while he plays with my band. He said, you don't have to worry about anything. We have place for him to live, food, transportation. We provide the instruments, everything. We just want his talent. So they said, okay. So they allow me So wow, the green light comes. They allow me to go to rehearsal one weekend. I was so happy. And man, from the first day we landed there, the quality of the instruments, and when we sound up for the first time, so wow, hear this. Now I am convinced. One big change came in the early stages of the band. I thought I was going to be the bass player because I was playing bass. But when I got there, who they brought? My great friend from Russies who graduated ahead of me, Brian Atkinson. He just returned from Kingston working with Jackie Mittoo, Tommy McCoke, all of these guys. He was with Studio One. Brian is a bass player because bass was his instrument and he has more experience than I do. Plus he was theoretically more developed than I was at the time. So they switched me to guitar. And that's how I ended up playing guitar. So I started really playing guitar at 68.
Back and make things right. I am so lonely. I am so lonely. I am so lonely, Carolina. Come back and make things right. Carolina, my darling, all I want is you. Carolina, my honey, and all my love is for you. Oh Carolina, oh Carolina, oh Carolina, my sweet darling, come back and make things right. Tell me down, guys.
I was able to transition from bass to guitar because I understood very well the tuning. First, remember the bass that I developed came from a guitar. So I was playing a little guitar first, so I understand basic, open string chords, the E's, the G, C's, and all of that stuff. I understood the tuning. So it was not a major problem, just to adjust my thinking between the third string and the second string. For those people who play music, the guitar is tuned in fourths. But when you get to the third string to the second string, they're thirds. Then you switch back to fourths. I understood that from then. So that helped. And I started to practice a lot because I realized now picking up this instrument, for me, it's kind of slightly late, but the mission can be accomplished if I put in the time to really practice. So I became a practicing freak. Every chance I get, I have the guitar in my hand. I would go to the store walking with a guitar. That's me. They said, the boy, they're a mad boy, I'm not talking to nobody. But then I walk up and with an instrument. And it brought me back to an incident with me and my dad before that time. There was a man in my community in Dias, George McNabb. He was a little bit imbalanced, and he would walk all over the street, say he was a musician. And he had this box that he walked around with, and one arm is in the box. I don't know how he transported it, and I don't know what he put in the box. But when George come in, because you hear that chung, all that weird stuff, and a kazoo in his mouth at the same time. So my dad looked at him one day and said, that's what you want to become? so when I'm walking with my guitar and practicing and stuff, it reminds me, say, gosh, I didn't want to embarrass my dad, but I'm walking with a legitimate instrument. I'm playing in a legitimate band. I am clean. I was always fit and well dressed. By the way, I am a retired track star. I was Russie's sprinter, doing 9.8 and 100 yards at 15, 16 years old. Got picked for the Olympics. The whole rest, a different story. So in between that, I have sports and I have music. And the opportunity for the Olympic team thing never happened because my dad didn't want to give me the transfer. I threatened him that I'm going to use my track scholarship to go study music. So I remained in Russies, and that went by the wayside. So I said, I'm not going to give up on the music. So I'm going to stick with the music. And anyhow, Mr. Sinclair's band, the Mighty Quins, we were an amazing band. He had Brian Atkinson on bass, myself on guitar, Dalton James, another friend from Russies, on drums, Ivan Box. I think Ivan might be from Mandeville, or one of those parishes. He was a banker playing with us. Bert Johnson, phenomenal vocalist. He used to sing with Clive Williams, the other gentleman from Ricky's River that I was in his band. Bert Johnson was the singer. So it's a 5-piece group, 4 instruments and a vocalist, and we did all the gigs between Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James. We used to go as far as the Wagon Wheel Club up in, that's way back. All along that coast, through Black River. I mean, we were just the workingest band, and it was a very wonderful, very amazing experience because I was in good hands. It's a very decent environment, people with some literacy. That band opened me up to many other things because Brian was kind of well read, and the books he would introduce for us to read, and apart from music books, we would have serious, very cerebral, very esoteric discussions about a lot of things, from creation, religion, physics, metaphysics, everything. And that experience helped to shape the musician that I would become later. And I really, really greatly appreciate this. I tell Brian all the time that, you know, he can be blamed or blessed for the person that I turned out to be, because he was a major influence. I'm a senior from high school. So from the Mighty Queens, when they broke up, I put together my own band in Lucy, the first band of the type in Lucy. We call ourselves Eugene and the Soul Hermits. Them days I'm a soul guy, my big afro, my sideburns, my Frankenstein boots and my bell bottoms. Hey, I was it. Those were the days. We were a nice band too. And 2 of the singers from that band will become the Itals, later on the Itals. Keith Porter, one of his partner, Manzi Smith, he passed away a number of years. Ronnie Davis was also one of the singer between the Mighty Queens and my band. As a matter of fact, on that wall, this is the same Mighty Queens band. And this is Eugene Gray here with my big afro and sideburns, and I was wearing my Frankenstein boots and, you know, bell bottoms and all of that good stuff. Ronnie Davis, likewise over here. The gentleman on the keyboard was Ivan Box. This is Brian, my friend from high school. He was a bass player, but the head of the guitar kind of blocked his vision. The gentleman sitting next to Ronnie was a fan. We were playing over in Manning's High School, as a matter of fact. I got this picture from Mr. Sinclair when I went to visit him a few years ago. Just to give you a rough idea, you know. And as I was saying, my band became Eugene and the Soul Hermits from Lucy. Myself, my good buddy Reginald Cyril, his brother Neville Cyril, and there was a gentleman out of Sandy Bay, we call him Irie. His last name is Murray. He was a rhythm guitar player. Now, the Mighty Queens never had a keyboard, you know, just 2 guitars, bass and drum, and the singers. The singers are from Westmoreland, as I say, Westmoreland. Keith Porter, leader of the Itals, and Manzi Smith, who passed away. And from the Hermits came apart, did a number of gigs. Mr. Sinclair decided to revive the Mighty Queens. So I went back to the Mighty Queens. It's with the Mighty Queens now I'm able to travel out to Jamaica for the first time. Christmas Day 1969, we traveled out of Jamaica. We got a contract at the Bimini Club Hotel in Bimini, Bahamas. So we were there for 6 months. And an amazing gig. We're working 6 nights a week. We're making $100 per week each. Them days is good money, and the Jamaican dollar was big at the time. So when we came back to Jamaica, of course, we were a hit, and we were so tight as a band. We would present our music. We were being rated in the categories of the bands like Tomorrow's Children and, you know, the bands of that caliber, Sonny Bradshaw 7. But for 5 of us, the things we did, because we were practicing so much and playing 6 nights a week keeps you fit. So we were sharp. Mr. Sinclair decided to get into the nightclub business. The club failed. the band came apart there. So I hooked up with Tony Hammond that I mentioned earlier, ex-Russian, with Tony Hammond and the Sultans. He had a resident band at the Yellowbird Club. That is where Palladium Theatre is. I became Tony's guitar player. And I really enjoyed that band. Tony's band was so tight again. You see, playing 6 nights a week and playing eclectic music. Mighty Queens was an eclectic band. Hermits was an eclectic band because that's how I came up. Tony Hammond was an eclectic band because we were playing for tourists who came from different parts of the world. So we had to learn how to play all of that music. And backing artists, that's when I was forced to learn to read music properly. Because we begin to back people like Bill Stratman out of Trinidad, the Mighty Robin, run into Sparrow. That's where I met Mighty Sparrow and all of these guys. We were importing people from America to Torrey Winter, who was a Jamaican American. And anybody that they could bring into the island or bring to this environment, we would end up backing them. And I begin to take my music even a little more serious. Now, I realize my shortcomings because I'm still self-taught. And a wonderful friend, fellow musician, loaned me a 3-volume set of a book. He said, look here, I know you are disciplined enough to go through this. And said, take it slowly, take it at your own pace. And what I would do when I get home from work at night with Tony Hammond Band, I get myself a big pot of coffee, some boiled eggs and some hard-boiled bread. No, I am wired. I'm studying. I roll out these books. So even I'm finished working at 2 o'clock in the morning. 5 o'clock I'm not sleeping yet. 6 o'clock because I'm up reading, studying. Say I'm determined to know these things because there are things on the paper that I know I need to express and I have to understand the language. It worked. So I begin to learn to read better, and one of the ways of learning to read music well is to try to write it. So I'm always having melodies happening in my head, so I need to write these, I need to compose. And the songs that we won the Pop and Mentor competition with earlier, it was my composition, called the Serenader Special. So I am moving ahead with the theory. There was a jazz festival at the Holiday Inn that was about 71, 72. And our band, though was not a jazz band, Tony Hammond's band, we were not a jazz band, but we were selected to play there. We were one of the very tight nightclub bands on the North Coast, and we were selected. There I decided to write 2 songs, 2 compositions, and we practiced them for about 5 months before the competition, because I know everybody could not read well and we want to get this done, but they were kind of unique, and I was cross-pollinating the music. I was listening a lot of American music, the Blood, Sweat and Tears, Jazz Crusaders. That's my influence. So it was kind of a little bit in that field. It wasn't reggae or ska yet. The earlier thing, Pop and Mentor, was ska. But this I said to myself, let me evolve a bit. Let me try something. Let me try to express the new inspirations that I'm hearing. And it went over well. And I'm very sure there are some footage, write-up, photograph, everything, in the Gleaner archives about that. It went over very, very well. One of the songs was called Witch's Hideaway. I can't remember the name of the other one. There were 2 of them. I was also influenced by a band out of New Orleans, the Meters. They revolutionized the funk. They are the Neville Brothers. That's who they are. Yeah, and they revolutionized the funk. So one of the songs, I remember, I had a kind of a Meters feel, like a polyrhythm, counter rhythms, and all that. Tony Hammond eventually left the business because even though we guys were happy and were doing all of that, I think economically it wasn't working for him. He got into the restaurant business, and Hammond's Bakery, that's Tony Hammond.
What a confusion it's just an illusion or a dream. So much distortion. Life's not getting better, so it seems. Some people think they're better, doing wrong to those without power. But this I'm certain, to a higher master they must answer. Only truth can set you free. Nature's law we will agree, but it's so hard for some to do right if it takes their life. Evil people aren't afraid. Look closer, you will see.
But what makes a legend? Legends know they must leave a legacy behind.
Currently, I'm here in Florida. I'm in Tamarack, Florida. And as you might notice, the background, the scenery here, is sitting in my studio with my wonderful friends, Judith and Barry. I have retired from teaching school full-time after touring with Burning Spear and all of these people, so that's gone. My wife and I, Felicia, we have created a non-profit organization called Roots of Music, Inc. And I'm bringing the arts to mostly kids who do not have access to the arts, whether in a foster care situation or the schools or wherever. We seek them out and we do that. It's been working quite well. We started about 2013. We got our 501c3 license 2011, and we started the school program. I solicit for instruments when I get instruments. I teach the kids using instruments donated. When the kids get to a certain level of proficiency, we give them an instrument. In the meantime, I still give private lessons. I run my studio, and I choose my gigs that I do. We have an annual performance. That's the highlight of what we do every year. Going to the schools, going to the orphanages, and so forth. What the high point of the whole year is where we do this show called The American Roots of Jamaican Music, and what that is about. There is always a cross-pollination artistically between Jamaica and America from ever since. Originally, Jamaica has its mento, that's our indigenous music. America has its rock and roll, but we end up now with something today we call reggae. Where did it come from? Where does it fit in the whole scheme of things with mento and rock and roll? The mento basically is a very African tradition. It comes from the whole slave experience, the 1890s. You have work songs like Emmanuel Road and using traditional instruments to express that folklore. What happened to Jamaica in the 1940s after World War II and radio become popular, we begin to hear this new music coming out of America, rhythm and blues. And one of the first American artists that was a major hit both in America and across the world was Louis Jordan. His music started a whole fire, lit a new flame in the Jamaicans when you hear the shuffle beat and all that. Louis Jordan is accredited for the person who transitioned rock and roll out of jazz.
Headed for the station with the back on my back. I'm tired of transportation in the back of a hat. I love to hear the rhythm of the clickety-clack. I need a lonesome whistle, see the smoke from the stack. I pal around with Democratic fellas named back. So take me right back to the track. Jack, choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie, woo-woo, woo-woo, choo-boogie, choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie. Take me right back to the track, Jack. You reach your destination, all alas and alack. You need some compensation to get back in the black. You take the morning paper from the top of the stack and read the situation from the front to the back. The only job that's open need a man with a knack. So put it right back on the rack, Jack. Choo-choo, choo-choo, shiboogie, woo-woo, woo-woo, shiboogie, choo-choo, choo-choo, shiboogie. Take me right back to the track, Jack.
My show features the music of early Jamaica, the mento. That's how the show begins, the program begins. And the early music, the early rhythm and blues that came out of America. From Louis Jordan, Fats Domino, Bobby Day, Lloyd Price, Frankie Ford, Roscoe Gordon, many more. And why I'm talking about that music, we have today reggae. Before there was reggae, there was rocksteady. Before rocksteady, there was ska. What is ska? Where did it come from? If you listen the pre-ska into the ska stuff, you're talking about 1951 to 58, 60. It sounds exactly like American music. And it was American music because we basically slightly abandoned the mento then and was adapting this new American sound. The American sound was also very progressive in the sense of the instrumentation. They use a lot of upright bass, drum set, piano, organ, blues guitar, horns and all that. Mento do not use those instruments. Mento is banjo, rumba box, hand drum, claves, maracas, sometimes a flute, fife or penny whistle, vocals or a clarinet. So this new thing happening now, everybody want to be in it now.
My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes.
Forever the teacher, Eugene couldn't resist giving a lesson in the American roots of Jamaican music.
For the first time in popular music, they begin to have a pattern for the bass line, right? In jazz, what they call walking bass, where the bass player just improvise, choose whatever notes he wants. But in the early rock and roll now, you begin to have things like this. Things like those. What we eventually call ska, or the offbeat, is the off tempo. You know, you have 1, 2, you also have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We did not focus on the 1, on the strong beat, we focus on the off beat. So if you add the bass, and so forth, that's the shuffle beat. And of course there's a shuffle beat for the drums also. This is completely opposite of mento. By the time we get to the 1958, 1960, all of this shuffle beat thing and the American sound is basically gonna change, because the Jamaican creativity, Jamaican ingenuity, we created what we call a one-drop drum. So Jamaicans will eventually use the changing the drum pattern and so forth, and stressing the accent, so it would sound like this. Same thing, same concept. The feel changes like a language with an accent. So this is now the Jamaican accent that eventually coming from ska, because ska and rock and roll are very close. Ska is same thing as rock and roll. The bass line might be different with ska. Walking bass as opposed to a pattern. And the American rock and roll did the same thing. Walking bass, having a specific pattern, that's having the swing in it, the Jamaican accent now. The Jamaican accent, we are going to change the drum pattern, which will dictate the feel of the music. Listen to this. We also change the tempo. Lot more action on the paradiddles in the left hand on the bass. This is how we begin to shape the music and claim it and own it, and rightfully so, because this interpretation is very unique to us. Eventually we're going to add the organ and a little bit of the mento. Started to get back into the music, right? Where you know, when you shuffle, that's basically the mento rhythm. On a guitar it feels a little different. All of these things we did. And of course, whenever you created a new genre, each instrument began to create its own language. In reggae music, for example, there's a thing what we call the trash rhythm guitar that was created by my friend who went to Rossies with me, Mr. Eric Frater. When they play check it, check it, check it on the guitar, that's Eric Frater. So Jamaica changed the accent of the music, right? Changing the drum pattern, putting the emphasis in different places. The bass lines became a little bit different, but we got all of that from America because we did not have that in mental.
Summer breeze, summer breeze. See the curtain hanging in the window in the evening on a fine night. A little light shining through the window lets me know that everything's alright. Summer breeze makes me feel fine. Blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine. Blowing through the jasmine in my mind.
Eugene's days are far from over as he continues to inspire, educate, entertain, and preserve the music and culture of the Jamaican people with Felicia by his side.
Through the screen and across the floor.
This piece is from the old slave tradition, of course, folk music. Hold him, Joe.